everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I have a super awesome guest with me today. I have Nickolas Crim here with me today, and he's like a podcast king, quite honestly, is what I'm going to call him today. And I'm going to turn it over to him, let him introduce himself, and then we're going to get kicked off.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. Thanks for having me. This is a cool project that you're doing, and
Yeah.
appreciate the invite. So, I don't know if I'd call myself a podcasting king, but I've kind of gone all in on it recently, and jumped into the fire. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, about me, I'm a podcaster. Something that I just mentioned. I kind of went all in on within the last year and having a lot of fun with. So you may see me on LinkedIn or Twitter posting some of that content. And then the rest of my time is spent in the healthcare space trying to help employers and help leaders provide quality healthcare to their employees. So that's kind of how I split my time. Love to read, love to learn, and I'm sure we'll talk some more about that. But
Yeah. Awesome. And what I love is that you have a background in that technology and kind of crypto and computers and everything like that. You've moved into healthcare. What sparked the move into kind of healthcare?
yeah, that's a good question. So right out of school, I went to work for an insurance carrier, and I was selling employee benefits. And
Yeah.
after a few years of doing that, and realizing that the majority of the consultant and the broker's time that I was calling on, that they were focused on the health plan. I just got really curious and kind of went down that rabbit hole and started to read a lot and try to understand how health plans were put together and maybe some of the problems facing the industry. And I was hooked. So after a few years of doing the other thing, I said, I want to make the jump, and I want to focus more on the healthcare piece. And so within the last year, I switched over and became an employee benefits advisor and really focused on building out those health plans. So that was kind of the entrance into that. And then the technology and the crypto piece is once again just my love of learning, and I like technology and I like messing around with that stuff. So I do a lot of that in my free time. So
There is no shortage of knowledge to pick apart from the healthcare industry, and that's what I found in my short term in the healthcare industry is there is literally not enough hours in the day for you to like dissect anything in the healthcare industry because it's ever changing every single day. There's once you dig into one issue, you go down a different rabbit hole, and then you go down another one once you get to the bottom of that one. Um, but it's I found it super evolving too, and I of course with everything going on with the pandemic right now, uh, so many things have come to light.
resonate with what you're saying. I had one of those moments last night. I was watching some content and some videos, and you kind of get to the point where like I can either like set this down and do something else and give my brain a rest, or I can continue to try to like cram this into my head and connect the dots. And I made the decision last night to go ahead and put the YouTube channel down, or put the iPad down, the YouTube videos down, and say I just let the stuff to sit here. But I've really been spending a lot of time really trying to understand how technology plays into healthcare.
Yeah.
Not from the standpoint, and really understanding like technology for technology's sake doesn't necessarily solve a problem. So really understanding like what is the purpose of the technology? Is it sparking some of those in-person patient physician conversations that need to happen more often? Is it ongoing triaging and monitoring of patients? So that I think that's where I'm spending a lot of my time, like really understanding probably the primary care physician and that ecosystem is where I'm spending a lot of my time, just thinking and learning. So
is that the most interesting part of healthcare that you've come into so far?
I'm pretty fascinated by it. I think a lot of what I spend my day to day around the employer piece and building out the plans, a lot of that has been the strategies and the strategies and the success stories are there. It's just finding people that are willing to listen and to implement those things. And then, so I think probably the most fascinating thing for me is kind of like, where are we going and what's going on with virtual care, and how is technology going to enhance the whole entire process and make it better? So
virtual care has been the most interesting part for me, where I continuously am learning about it. not through just my job, but also you've had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Shantanu Nundy, but a lot of what he preaches is that virtual primary care.
Yeah.
So that's where I've really like found my fascination at, just because I think what's coming could be super cool at the same time where you're not having to have doctors fax documents over to different hospitals or other doctors. It's all in one place. Um, so it'll be super interesting when that time comes, if it comes hopefully soon, um,
Yeah.
and what that looks like.
This week I was reading some stuff, and what I thought was fascinating is it seems like the pyramid is kind of flipping the way that I heard it
Yeah.
put. And right now patients, we really rely on like patients to determine I need to go see a doctor based on how I'm feeling or these symptoms that I'm having. And what I'm really probably most fascinated about with virtual care is like, how do you flip that pyramid and create a situation where your symptoms and your biomarkers and that type of stuff is being monitored, and then when something is irregular or something is
Yeah.
too high, then a physician triggers that
Yep.
appointment or
Yep.
reaches out to you, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of totally, I think we're having to change our mind and our mindset around what that looks like. And it's pretty interesting. We could probably go down even further down that rabbit hole, but
We definitely could.
yeah,
It will be super interesting in the next couple of years. I think there's been so much change in the last year, because of the pandemic, but it'll be interesting in the next 2-3 years what that change looks like going forward as well.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
Definitely.
Hopping into the podcast, we're just gonna hop right into it.
Okay.
The three that you have: the Nickolas Crim Show, Exploring Healthcare, and then Executive Spotlight.
Yeah.
Can we just start from the top and you just kind of like run through the purpose of each of these and why three?
So podcasting for me, I was the kid growing up. I loved listening to the radio.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just music. I loved listening to talk. I was a weird kid that loved listening to talk radio. And I would, sometimes I would call in, I'd make a comment, or I would call in to share my point of view. And I was just fascinated by this job that someone was paid to sit there and just talk about ideas, interview guests, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then also growing up, I love to ask people what they did, especially adults. Like, I'd love to hear about their jobs and their background. So enter podcasting, which was this like perfect mix of talking and
Oh yeah.
exploring ideas, and also asking people, what do you do? Can I ask you more about that? So that's just kind of like what got me interested, I guess, in the space and really just interviewing in general. And so, yeah, so I have three, the Nickolas Crim Show and the Executive Spotlight are really, the purpose is to really interview just interesting people.
Right.
I really resonated with the mission of your show and kind of why you got into this, and that desire for continuous learning. And that's what I hope to do. I think people are all very unique. We all have like really interesting stuff about us. And so I like to try to explore and find and dig and poke for those things. And it's exciting me, just that process, because sometimes those interesting things or facts or ideas are in places you wouldn't necessarily expect them.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So the Nickolas Crim Show is just a little bit more, I would say, a wider ranging topics. The Executive Spotlight is a little bit more business focused, a little more executive focused. And then the Exploring Healthcare just kind of goes back to, like I said, how I spend my days, and really wanting to continue to understand the industry, understand where things are headed, understand new businesses and ideas that are pushing things forward, and share those with others. So
I resonated with what you were saying at the beginning. I was like, that's exactly why I started the conversation series, because I got out of college and I was like, I was always the kid who learned more outside of school than sitting in a class. So when I got out of school, I was like, okay, I'm still hungry to keep learning. What is the next thing I want to go learn? And I was I'm never been socially like I'm not a big social person, but I love talking to people, and like you said, learning more from people like you telling me your life and what you do. It helps me and it sticks with me.
mm-hmm.
I think that's the most powerful piece, is that your people's stories stick with you more than you think they do.
Right.
So I think that's the powerful piece of it.
I think for me too, since graduating college, there was quite a long period of time where I kind of lost some of that, curiosity for a number of different reasons. And I kind of lost that desire to have conversations with people. And I'm with you. I'm more on the introverted side, so I'm not real big like going out and a ton of people around me. I kind of
Yeah,
really am in my comfort zone when I'm having those one-on-one conversations on a
absolutely.
particular topic. But so that's been the kind of the cool thing, I think, last year to come out of the pandemic and the world of Clubhouse and Lunch Club and podcasting. It's really provided a medium to really reignite some of that for me and re-engage that part of me that, like I said, that for a while there, just for whatever reason or for multiple reasons, just just didn't have that. So
Is the energy feeding behind all three of these podcasts, your continuous wanting to learn, your continuous hunger to learn? Is that what's feeding these three?
yeah, definitely. Mhm.
Where did that hunger come from? Like you just said, after college, it kind of died a little. It wasn't exactly that spark. How did you get it sparked back up again?
That's a great question. And I think really the thing, I started the Nickolas Crim show, which was my first podcast at the end of last year, and I did 4 episodes, and I just kind of let it sit.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I kind of hit a roadblock, like, hey, that was fun, and I kind of enjoyed that process, but where do I take it?
Right.
And really, for me, earlier this year, I was reading that there's a newsletter I subscribed to, and there's a lady named Julia LaRoche, who was a Yahoo correspondent and a journalist, and she did a Q&A session in this newsletter, and she talked about her process. She talked about her preparation. She talked about some of these high-profile guests that she was able to sit down and interview. How sometimes it took her years to get in front of to get them and actually secure that email or secure that interview. And but she didn't let it stop her. She would just create a Google Doc of the person. She would continue to gather information. She would move on, perfecting her craft, and then ultimately, she viewed that no as a not right now, and she would stay persistent with it. And that was just so inspiring to me. And I think it just really had an impact on me. And I think it made me probably less uncomfortable with the process of like reaching out to more high profile guests and
Yeah.
reaching out to busy people and asking for their time.
Yeah.
And it helped me think through some of maybe the preparation that I needed to put in that I hadn't put in the first go around. So yeah, I would say that was definitely a big spark for me, just hearing her talk about that and understanding the reality of it. And hey, booking guests can be hard and it can be challenging, but it's so rewarding. I think help kind of reignite that in me as well. So
Yeah. I had a college professor that said to me, um, when I was talking about all of this, he said, "What's the worst thing they can say? No."
mhm.
And I was like, "You're right." That shouldn't be stopping me from doing what I keep dreaming about, what I love to be doing. And that has literally stuck with me. So every time I send an email, I literally say out loud, I'm like, "What's the worst thing they can say? No."
Right.
Um, just because to your point, you never know who is actually truly going to say yes back to you. You can send 10 pitches out to people and you might get that one yes, and you're thanking God uh,
Yeah.
for it. But it's like that process. You just have to mentally be positive about it and be like, what's the worst thing they can say is no, but you might get that yes.
Yeah. And I think one thing that helped me is, in my day job as a benefits advisor, I do a lot of prospecting. I
Yeah.
do a lot of cold outreach, and some of the same tools that you use to do that, you can use when trying to book a podcast host. And I was getting a lot of at bats with that and
Yeah.
becoming more comfortable with that process. So I think that kind of coupled with getting that spark of inspiration and
Yeah.
seeing somebody that had been successful with it and kind of shared her process just
Yeah.
reignited me and got me excited about it again. And
That's
um I was going to say too, it's never been easier to start a podcast. I kind of tried to launch one in college, and it wasn't difficult, but it was a little harder. And
yeah.
so now it's super easy. And what I found with the 3 is that it's the same process as far as booking the guest, preparation, the post show editing, and that kind of stuff. So, part of the strategy behind that too is really trying to understand maybe what audience some of those interviews would resonate with. And, on some of them, like the executive spotlight, it's going to be a little bit more like CEO, CFO heavy. And that may not cater to everyone and they may look elsewhere. But so just, I think having that variety and also being able to really cater to certain audiences is helpful. And it's hadn't been too hard to set up. So
yeah. I think my favorite, and what I love about this is like, I'm a super, like, I love doing research on people, especially for these. So I think that's been my favorite part is I'm like, I get to dig into this person's life. I get to find points where I want to ask questions and and it gets me excited. Is there a point for this whole prep or when you're recording the podcast, like that gets you excited for all of it?
Yeah, I enjoy the research as well. And what I mentioned earlier was I really like trying to find kind of those obscure story or an experience or some statement that they made in, this interview over here that no one's maybe read before or few people have read, and really try to extract, like, why did you say that? Or why did that impact you like that? Or tell me more about that. So I like trying to find those interesting things, maybe in places that you necessarily wouldn't think to look. And then also I love it when you ask a question or you bring up something where the person themselves hadn't really thought about it much, and you kind of catch them not off guard, but they're like, yeah, I hadn't really thought much about that, but yeah, that's interesting. Let's riff on that. Let's talk about that a little bit. So
I love the simplest questions too, when you ask people and they're just kind of, they were expecting the really high up questions and they're like, huh. And I've had people like sit there on the simplest questions and they're like, that's a really great question. I'm like, I asked you blah blah blah, and I'm like, I asked somebody this on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's a craft. And you asked about what reignited that or the underlying desire to do podcasting. I think someone like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan, those guys have had a huge impact on me. And as I've listened to hours and hours of their interviews, they definitely inspired me. But really understanding that what they were doing was a craft and there was a skill to it, and the ability to ask very simple questions and then kind of get out of the way and just let the person go and ask simple follow-up questions. And I've learned a lot from them, and I agree, some of the times it was just like simplest questions really bring out a lot. So
Joe Rogan is, in my eyes, one of the coolest people to listen to in terms of podcasts, because you could have one episode where he's interviewing a celebrity and then the next he's going into some of these hard topics. So he gets into it and he's not afraid to talk about things, which I love, because it just opens up more and more conversations. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of like, is this the next YouTube, or is this the next kind of medium that everybody hits?
Yeah, I have thought about that some, and I think for me, it's gone back to what's my motivation for doing this. And when I think about like a saturated maybe market, or there's a lot of podcasts, it's like, okay, well, that may mean that I don't have as many listeners, or I'm not gonna be the next like Tim Ferriss podcast or Joe Rogan. Like, those have already been established. But it's like, can I have the conversations I want to have? Can I work on the craft? Can I get better at interviewing people? Do I enjoy the process of do I enjoy the process of researching, like we talked about? And that's really my motivation for doing it. And then it's like, I don't know where this will lead, and I don't know if this may never become a big thing, but I'm still getting I'm working on these skills, I'm getting this benefit from it. And sometimes the most rewarding thing is some of these guests, like just getting to interact with them, sometimes like over the course of a month, between setting up the interview, like through the interview, follow-ups after to say, hey, it's gone live, or hey, you said this and that was really interesting, I've been thinking about that, is really a cool part of the a part of the process. So
one part I want to hit moving away from podcasts is your website really quickly, because as I was doing my research, your website, super straightforward. Everything they need to know about you, what you do, your podcast is on that one website page right there. What I loved was underneath is the projects section that of
Mhm.
things that you're passionate about, things that you have interest in that you would love to do um, projects about. How did you come up with that kind of, I'm going to put this out there and we'll see what interest comes from it.
Yeah, someone inspired me to do that. There's a girl I follow on Twitter that had just gotten into the longevity space, and she had made this huge kind of career shift, and she had redone her website, um, and actually I saw another guy as well. So I just ran across a few people that had posted that on their webpage, and these are the projects and these are the things that I want to work on. And um, yeah, so I was like, I'm going to steal that and make it my own, and
Nice.
just put it out there. And
Yeah.
hopefully over time that be a reminder and add things and take things down, and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Coming from our conversation, my favorite part was the relationship section, which it's clear now talking after talking to you a little bit, like why that's kind of it, like it's on there. But personally for me, I was like, I love that because that's a whole point of kind of why I'm doing this, why I'm sure there's a piece of you that's doing your podcast. It's forming those relationships with people. So that was my favorite section. Uh,
Right. Yeah, I feel it's been a while since I put that up, but I just
yeah,
still remember, being compelled to put that up really for me to say, um,
yeah,
this is going to be in line with a lot of these other things that that I want to work on. And I think for me, it's been the kind of going back to like what I mentioned about kind of losing that curiosity and desire to have conversations. I've had a lot of opportunity by putting myself out there online and reaching out to people or commenting on things. And there's been a lot of, conversations and things that have sparked from that have had a huge impact on me that are now ongoing conversations or relationships. And so I think part of that was triggered as well, of just really expanding my mind of what a relationship can be. It doesn't have to be that person day in and day out that you live with or your family. It can be people that you interact with maybe a couple times a month, sharing meaningful stuff or commenting on things. And that can be a meaningful relationship that drives value and makes an impact in your life. And so part of that came from really trying to expand what I think about when I say relationship as well. So
very cool.
yeah.
When I was looking at it, I was like, I'm almost looking at your like manifestation board
uh
of just right there, as in terms of like these are the things he wants to work on. But it'd be cool to talk to you 5 years down the road and be like, did you do any of these? Did any of these projects ever come to life, and kind of see what would happen? But I was like, this is like manifestation right in front of my eyes. That the kid that you used to be, that you was listen to talk radio talk shows, what would be one thing, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
oh man, I've asked that question to others before, and now I have to answer it. Hmm. I think for me, I've taken going through school and right out of school. I think I took a very like traditional path as
Yeah,
far as first job out of college and
yeah,
going to work for a large corporation, and that's had a lot of benefits, but it's had some challenges too. And I think in parallel to me kind of losing that curiosity, I've also during that time lost a lot of kind of like the creative side of me,
yeah.
the side that was obsessed with those type of things like conversations and the creating a talk show or drawing and that type of things. And I kind of lost that. So I think I would just tell myself like, don't go this traditional route, but like don't lose your creative side and continue developing and working on that. And don't completely put that to the side, because you can always pick it back up, but you lose some years and you lose some valuable time where you could still be working on those things. And those
Absolutely.
things, those projects could lead to some cool things as well that you may not have
Yeah.
thought that they could. So
Very cool. I love that. What is one thing you are looking forward to here in the next year with your podcast, with the industry you're in right now? What's one thing?
I really want to, let's see. I think for me, I really want to book that like really high profile guest, I would say, as
Yep.
far as like, podcasting.
Yeah.
As far as the work in healthcare, I really, in 6 months, a year, I'd really like to say that I have a better grasp on kind of the stakeholders in the industry, where the industry is going,
Yep.
where the opportunities lie. And then, last, my wife and I are expecting our first child in February. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. So, in the midst of that, that word relationship is taking on a whole
Yeah.
different, meaning, and that's going to be changing. So I would say those are kind of the three things. So,
Very cool. I love that. I love that. And I think I am crossing my fingers that you land that big guest. I'm very excited for you and your wife. Um, I think like when you get that big guest or that guest where you're like, they're not gonna say yes, but I'm gonna send it anyways, and you get the yes back, you're like on top of the world.
and and I think for me, I've been, very like fortunate and feel very like blessed to have had to talk to a lot of the people that I've talked to.
Yeah.
There's some very, very smart and talented people that I've had a chance to talk to that have given me an hour. Um, and so maybe to like expound on that more, it's definitely those people that have reached out and it's like,
Yeah.
now's not the time. Like, I appreciate you thinking of me. Now's not the time.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first time going through that process of like following up and really kind of earning
Yeah.
the opportunity to sit down with them would be,
Yeah.
would be pretty cool. So
I am I say all the time I'm incredibly thankful for everybody that I've gotten to talk to, because it's opened my eyes to different topics, different experiences. But I don't it's the process, like you have said, of going back and sending. Once you've kind of gotten those episodes underneath you, you're like, okay,
mhm.
I've got more of a base to stand on. Let me go back and see if I can get a yes now.
I would agree. Yeah, you kind of get that sense with some people that they want to see a little bit more, want to see that you're all in on it, and kind
Yeah.
of see what you produce before they give you a yes. So
Absolutely. They want to see they want to see you actually do the work. Which
right.
takes you then back to school. You're like, I just got done doing all the work. Now I got to go do more.
Hmm.
My last question I love to ask everybody, we've kind of dug into it a little bit with you. But just what inspires you?
Really, I love, I think going back to the learning and just the exploring ideas, I really like to understand why things work the way that they are. I like to explore, why people are the way that they are, the experiences they've had. I'm reading uh, a lot of history, a lot of biographies right now, and so you read about someone like Benjamin Franklin or the Wright brothers or Steve Jobs, and so just reading those stories and reading about people that have done amazing things,
Yeah.
um, and really going back to the origins of that and
Yeah.
understanding how people thought that they thought that they were crazy or had never been done before, and maybe they were underqualified, and that's really where I'm drawing experience from, inspiration from these days. So
I need to get a list of biographies from you because I love biographies.
yeah, definitely.
That's just where I live. I love, like you said, I love learning about other people. And especially Steve Jobs was one of my all-time favorite books. Um, just because his mind is so incredible to just kind of jump into. Uh,
Yeah,
so I love that book.
yeah. And even someone recently, I've been reading uh Roberts's biography on Napoleon.
Yeah.
And even I think I'm just been really inspired by people that are so young that have these audacious goals. And he
Yeah.
was someone that, like, he was 22 or 23 and he decided that he was going to take it upon himself to write the history of Corsica, like where he grew up. And you're like, and people laughed at him, and
Yeah.
mentors in his life said, I think history should be written by the old and the gray haired, and what are you doing? And but they pushed through those things, and they wrote those things, and they had those aspirations. And so that's the thing for me. It's, as while you're young, to try to do things that people don't
Yeah.
maybe think that you're qualified for or that you have enough
Yeah.
experience for, and just hey, what's the worst? You fall on your face, or people tell you that you shouldn't be doing it. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's the worst that can happen. So
Yeah, lessons upon different messages that you totally get from out of all of it, where you're like, wow, these people. Well, and even I watch, I'm a big sports person, and so when I see so many people, like young tennis players, young
uh-huh.
athletes playing, and I'm like, they're 21 years old in professional sports, and
Yeah.
I'm sitting over here, and you're just like, but the documentaries come out and you learn so much from why they are the way that they are and why they got into what they're doing. um, that resonates with me as well, because I'm just like, it's super, like, what's the motivation behind everybody doing what they're doing in life?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. And
it's,
I think to expand, like piggyback on that too. I've been inspired recently by reading some books and reading about stories that maybe they found
yeah,
that business, or they found that project, or they found that novel that they were supposed to write later on in life. Because sometimes I get a little bit discouraged, like kind of the ship sailed, I'm getting closer to 30, and
yeah,
some of these people in their late 20s or teens are doing these amazing things, especially when you look at like tech and that kind of stuff, and you're like,
yep,
did I miss the boat? So I'm inspired to read people that are young that have done great things, but then also, read those people that later on in life is when they really found the thing that they were passionate about, or they found the thing, a
absolutely,
project that they did something great with. So that's been inspiring as well. I had a kid I was talking to last year that told me he wanted to be a YouTuber.
yeah,
That's what he wanted to do with his life, and I just thought that was awesome. And to have a job like that, and a creative outlet that would not have been a job and been a means to support himself. I'm like, the fact that he's thinking that way is just encouraging, because it may not be YouTube, but there's going to be some platform or some way for him to make a living doing something that he enjoys like that, which is cool. And that conversation, back to, I guess, podcasting. I did an interview with a lady named Lauren Bolden, who owns a pie shop here in
yeah,
my town, and um, I was going to talk to her about her processes and being in business
yeah,
and making pie. And the interview, we really spent a lot of time talking about this was,
yeah,
her taking a chance and saying, I kind of went this traditional route, but I want to try this thing, and I don't know if it'll work, but we're going to sacrifice her husband and her to give it a shot. And
yeah.
her husband's been able to kind of do the same thing with his music. And we talked a lot about that, just hoping that people that have those dreams and aspirations, how do you continue to hold that and go for those things? So
My some of my favorite stories are people who are lawyers or like high profile jobs, and they go from being a lawyer to opening up their own bakery or something like
yeah,
that. They're just making wedding cakes now. I'm like, you're like, what's the connection between the two? How did we go
right.
from being a lawyer to doing this? So that story, that's actually some of my favorite stuff that I love to listen to. Because you're craving that, there's that question there, how did we get from that to that
Right.
um, situation? So it's really cool to have those conversations with people.
Yeah. And as people, we're dynamic. We're diverse even within ourselves and our interests and stuff. So it is interesting to see those things kind of play out and
Yeah,
to maybe what seemed like opposing worlds. So
yeah, it's cool. You're like, oh, you've been able to do this since you were a kid. It's great. Like,
yeah.
why weren't you doing this the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so very cool. Thank you, Nickolas, for coming on and talking to us. I have absolutely loved this conversation. And I'm gonna have all 3 podcasts linked down below, as well as Nickolas's Twitter and LinkedIn, so you can go check him out and follow along with him. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today. I've loved this.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you, Danielle. I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait to see and listen to other episodes you got coming out here soon. So
yeah, I appreciate it. We'll stay in touch.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.